Hey everyone, Kevin here. Today, I want to show you how you can set permissions in Microsoft SharePoint. I'll show you how you can do it to the site, the document library, and even an individual document. So what are permissions and why should you care? Permissions define who's allowed to do what. Who can go in and change the way the SharePoint site looks? Who can read that individual document? They are critically important. All right, let's jump on the PC and let's start setting some permissions. Here I am on the SharePoint homepage, and before we jump in and start talking about permissions, I wanted to call out that if you're brand new to SharePoint and maybe you haven't used it before and you want to understand, well, what are the benefits? How could you start taking advantage of it? I've included a link to an introductory video down below in the description that'll give a very good overview of how you can start using SharePoint. With that now out of the way, let's dig into permissions. You can set your permissions up front when you create a new SharePoint site. You can also go back to an existing SharePoint site and you can modify your permissions. Now, I am a little embarrassed to say, at the Kevin Cookie Company, we've recently had an employee who stole our secret cookie recipes. It's really been a big hit to the company. And part of the problem was we just didn't have good permissions in place. So today I'm on point to set up a new SharePoint site and I need to make sure that I set the proper permissions. And for this, I'm going to set up a new SharePoint site. Up in the top left-hand corner, I can click on this link to create a new site. This opens up a pane over on the right-hand side where I can decide what type of site I want to set up. The most common selection is a team site. Let's say you're working on a project, you're working with a team, you want to share files, maybe you want to share a calendar. You'll use a team site to do that. You can also set up a communication site. Now, this is more intended for one-way communication. You can think of maybe your executive leadership team wants to communicate out to the organization. They would use a communication site. Since you'll most often use a team site, we're going to use that today, and I'll show you how to set permissions here. Let's click on this. Next, I can choose a site name, and for this, I want to create a site that's going to house all of our cookie recipes. So I'll type in cookie recipes, and it looks like this site is available. That's great. Right down below, I'll type in a site description, and this is where we're going to keep all of the recipes behind our great tasting cookies. And down below, this is our first opportunity to start setting permissions. Right here, I can decide whether the site is public, and this means that anyone in the organization can access this site. Now, previously I had it set to public, and this is where one of our employees came in and they stole our secret recipe. So I need to clamp down on things a little bit more. I could also set up a private SharePoint site, and this is where I can define all of the members who have access to this site. For this SharePoint site, I'll select private. Now, one thing to keep in mind is just because you choose public or private here, we can always come back in later on and we can change this option, and I'll show you exactly how you can do that. All these other settings look good, so I'll click on next. On the next screen, I can add members to this group, and this also allows me to set permissions for these different people. Right up here, I can add additional owners. So what can an owner do? Well, as an owner, I basically have full control. I could add additional members. I have control of the site settings. I could add web parts. I control the site security. I could even delete this entire site if I wanted to. So owners have full control. So think carefully before you add someone. Down below, you can also add members. So what is a member and how is that different from an owner? Well, as a member, you can add other members, but you need approval from owners before you can add them. You could also add, edit, delete content. You could create lists, but you can't go in and you can't delete the site. So it's a little bit more restricted in terms of what you can do as a member compared to an owner. And for now, I want to add one member. I'll add Patty Fernandez. She's the president here at the Kevin Cookie Company. Later on, I'll show you how you could add even more permissions beyond just owner and members. For now, this looks good, so I'll click on finish. This now drops me in my new SharePoint site, and right here in the top right-hand corner, I can see that this is currently set to a private group, and I see that there are only 2 members. Here, if I jump over to Patty's view, Patty's also able to access this SharePoint site. She's a member of this site, so she can navigate to this site just like I can. Here I am now in Diego's view, and Diego, we didn't even mention him yet, and he's not a member of this site. When Diego tries to access this site, he's greeted with this message that tells him that he needs permission to access this site, so he's unable to see it by default. Now, he could come in and he could request access, but then me as the owner, I would have to grant Diego access to this site. Now, I do feel kind of bad that Diego can't access this site and he can't see our secret recipe. I mean, he is part of the leadership team, so he should probably have access. Now, I'm back here in my account and I created this SharePoint site. So I'm the owner of this site. I can very easily add Diego. Here up in the top right-hand corner, I can click on this text that says to members. And this opens up all of the group membership. And here I can confirm that I'm the owner and Patty is one of the members. Now I can click on this text that says add members and I can add Diego. Here I'll type in Diego's name. Here I see Diego, our HR manager, and then I'll click on save. Here, this has added Diego, and by default, it makes him a member. Now, I could click on this dropdown and I could switch him to an owner if I want, but I want to keep the owner group small. That gives a lot of permission, so I'll leave Diego as a member. I'm back now in Patty's view, and up in the top right-hand corner, we can see that there are now 3 members. If Patty clicks on this, here too, she can see all of the different members. But remember that Patty is just a member. So compared to me, Patty cannot come in here and add any other members. And same with Diego, he can't add any other members. Only me as the owner can add other members. Also, one difference you'll notice, Patty also can't elevate someone to become an owner. She can't change any of the permissions on these different members. Only the owner can do that. Back now in my view, once again, I could click over here on members and I could add any number of members. And when I click on add members, I can add people in my organization, or I could even add people outside of my organization. So let's say maybe we have a contractor who is going to help us at the Kevin Cookie Company. I could type in their email address here and that would give them guest access to our SharePoint site. Now, once again, this is a highly prized asset of our cookie recipe, so I don't want to have external people come in here. So for now, I'm just going to click on cancel. When I created this new SharePoint site, I set it to a private group. So I need to come in and add every single member who has access to this site. Now, let's say that actually I was just creating a SharePoint site and I want to be super transparent and let anyone in the organization come in and access this site and any files within this site. I can change this to a public group. So just because I set it up front doesn't mean I can't go back later and change that. To change this, you can go up to the settings gear in the top right-hand corner. And within this menu, there's an option called site information. When we click on this, here I could view the site logo, the site name, and all of that, and I can make changes to it. But down here, there's also privacy settings. Now I can click on this and I can switch it to a public site. So when I do this, I'll click on save. I've now changed this site to a public group, and here you'll see that it says public group. I still see that there are only 3 members, but now anyone can come in and access this site. Let's jump over to Nestor's view to see what this experience is like. I'm now in Nestor's view and he navigated to this SharePoint site. Now, once again, up in the top right-hand corner, we can see that it's currently set to a public group. So even though Nestor's not one of the group members, he's able to access all of the contents on this SharePoint site. So maybe you have some content that really isn't confidential and you want to share it with your entire organization. You can set it to a public group and anyone inside your company will have access. It doesn't give access outside of the company, but it makes it easier internally. Back now in my view, I want to share the secret recipe here, so I need to clamp down on who has access. So of course I don't want to make this a public group. So once again, to change this, I could go up to the settings gear, I'll go down to site information, and once again, I'll change this back to a private site and then click on save. And just like that, I've now turned this SharePoint site private again, and only the 3 members listed here will have access to any of the contents. Now you might be wondering, are there any other differences between, say, being an owner and just being a member? Here in my view as an owner, I could come over and I could create new items. I could create a new list, a new document library. I could upload files. When I go up to the settings gear, here I have a whole bunch of different options. Once again, I could edit the site information. I could set these site permissions. I could change the look, change the site designs. Let's jump over to Patty to see what she can do. Here in Patty's view, she can do a lot of what I can do as an owner. Here, as a member, Patty could come in, she could add a new list, a document library, she can upload documents, she can even edit what this SharePoint site looks like. However, when we go up to the settings gear, you'll notice this menu is a little bit shorter. She can't go into the site information. Although she could view the site permissions, she can't set them. So once again, permissions define what features and capabilities you have available to you. And as a member, you have fewer features available to you. Back now in my view, how do you actually set who gets access to what? What should a member have versus what should an owner have? Well, if we go up to the settings gear in the top right-hand corner, there's an option called Site Permissions. Let's click on that. Within Site Permissions, here again, I can invite additional people and give them access to this SharePoint site. Right down here, I can review who all of the different site owners are. When I created this SharePoint site, it also created a new group that contains all of the different members. Here, I can hover over this and I can see who all of the members are. So let me click into this and I'll click over onto members. Here I can review all of the members of this group, and here I can confirm that I'm currently an owner and Diego and Patty are both members. Here too, I could also review who all the site members are, and here again, it also creates a group for all of the site members. And down below, there's a new category called Site Visitors. So what is a site visitor? Well, from top to bottom, you basically go from full access being the owner, a little bit more restricted as a member, to the least power or least control as a visitor. You can read and download content, but you can't edit anything. You can't make changes to the SharePoint site. So this role is focused on consumption of content. We've talked about how you can add new site owners. We've also looked at how you can add new site members. And in a moment, I'll show you how you can add site visitors. But before we do that, there is a massive risk for my new SharePoint site. Both Patty and Diego, although I trust them a lot, they can share this site, they could share the recipe with anyone, and they'll also get access. I need to jump into the sharing settings and let me modify these. This drops me in these site sharing settings, and here I could define what all different members of the site can share. Can they share files? Can they share the folders? Can they share the all up site? From the top, this is the least restrictive, and going down, it becomes more restrictive. With our cookie recipe, this is a highly valuable asset to the company, and I need to make sure that there's not broad sharing of it. So I'm going to select this option, so only the site owner, so only I can share this recipe with others. And down below, there's a toggle for allow access requests. So if you're not a member of this site, are you allowed to request access to it? Now, once again, this is a highly confidential cookie recipe, so I don't even want people requesting access, so I'll toggle this off and then I'll click on Save. Now that we've set the sharing settings, let's go down and click on Advanced Permission Settings. I want to see what else I can do to make sure that our cookie recipe stays safe. This now drops me in SharePoint permissions, and I now have full control over who can access what. Let's first focus right here in the center of the page. Here I can see my 3 different groups that are by default established for me when I created this SharePoint site. Here I have Cookie Recipes members, and this is what Patty and Diego are part of. Over here on the right-hand side, I can see that the permission level is set to edit. Right down below, I can see there's another group for owners, and this is what I'm part of. And as an owner, I have full control. And underneath that, there's another default group that's set up called visitors, and no one's currently part of this group. And this group has read access to the contents on the SharePoint site. Although SharePoint sets up these 3 groups for us, and it's very nice of SharePoint to do that, I'm not just limited to this set. Up in the top left-hand corner, I can create additional groups. So maybe I want to have another members group with maybe a different set of permissions. I can configure that by clicking on this button. Now, Nestor's been bugging me that he wants to view the recipe. I don't know if I want Nestor coming around and messing with our SharePoint site, but he should have read access. So I want to add Nestor to the visitors group. To add Nestor to visitors, I'll go up into the top left-hand corner and click on Grant Permissions. This now opens up a prompt where I can give permission to Nestor. Here I'll type in Nestor's name, I'll type in Nestor Wilk, and that looks good. I could type in a message down below. He knows what this is, so no need to enter in a message. And down below, I can click on Show Options. And right here, I can set the permission level. So I can assign Nestor to one of these pre-existing groups. I could add him to members, owners, or visitors. And down below, I see even more permission levels. You have full control, design, edit, contribute, and read. Now, so far throughout this, you'll see here that owners is assigned full control. So that's the highest level of permission. Right here, you have edit, which doesn't have quite as much power as full control. And then you have read at the very bottom. So when you look at these different permission levels, you go from the least restrictive or the most amount of power. And as you go down this list, you go down to the most restrictive or the least amount of power. Now, I could assign Nestor to one of these specific permission levels, but I'd rather assign him to a group. By assigning Nestor to a group, maybe someone else comes along in the future and I also want them to have read-only access. Then I'd also assign that person to visitors. Now, let's say I need to modify permissions for the all-up group. I could simply come in and I could modify the whole group. If instead I had assigned each individual to a specific permission level, well then I'd have to go through all of the different individuals to update their permissions. So as a best practice, it's always the best to assign people to different groups. Here I'll select visitors and then click on share. Back now on the main screen, if I click into cookie recipe visitors, here I can see that Nestor is part of this group. So that's exactly what I wanted. I'll click on back. As you can see, Nestor is currently part of the visitors group and his permission level is read. But what does read really mean and what can you do if you have read permission? Right up here on the top ribbon, let's click into permission levels. This shows me all of the different permission levels that I can assign. These are all pre-created for me. However, I could also go in and I could add my own permission levels by clicking on add a permission level. However, I think SharePoint did a good job and they have good presets in place. So let me click into read just to see what all that entails. Here within read, I can see the name of the permission level and I can also see a description of it. And here I can see all of the different features within SharePoint. And the check mark indicates that Nestor will have access to this. So he could view items, he could open items, but he can't add new items, he can't delete items. So this defines what permissions he has. Here I could go through, I could make modifications if I want to, and down below, maybe I copy the permission level. Maybe I want to make a new one based off of this. All of this looks good here. I don't need to make any changes, so I'll click on cancel. Back now on the permission level screen, you can click on any one of these to dig into it to see what are the actual controls and what are the actual features you get with each one of these permission levels. And if you want to change them, you can click into any one of them and you can make changes. You could create new ones. You could delete any one of these permission levels. So you truly do have full control over what people can do on a SharePoint site. As you go through and you set up your permissions and you assign different individuals to these different groups, these permissions apply to everything on the SharePoint site. So if you have document libraries, if you have individual documents, the permissions from here cascade down to those different items. Basically, your document library and your individual documents will inherit all of these permissions. But what if you want different permissions on a document library or maybe on an individual document? Let's see how we can set it, and let's start with a document library. Here, I'll click over on Documents. I'm now in a document library, and to set permissions just for this specific document library, I can go up to the top right-hand corner, click on this Settings gear, and right here, there's an option for Library Settings. When I click on this, this opens up a number of settings, and right in the middle at the top, there's an option for permission for this document library. Let's click on that. This now drops me into the document library, and as you can see, this library inherits the permissions from the parent, from cookie recipes. I could come in here and I could click on stop inheriting permissions, and I could customize what the permissions look like just for this document library. As a word of caution, if you start modifying permissions on the document library level and on the individual document level, the overhead of managing all of that goes up. Ideally, you want to manage as many permissions on a higher level as possible. Back within the document library, here I finally uploaded my top secret recipe. I've gone through, I've set all of the permissions, and I feel confident now to place this document on this site. Now, I can also set the permissions on this specific document. When I hover over the document, I'll see an ellipsis over here, and there's the option to manage access. Over on the right-hand side here, I can see who all has access to this document. And right down here, I can see that the owner has access, the visitors have access, and the members have access. Now, with Nestor, I know I added him as a visitor, and I do want him to read contents on this site, but I don't want him to read this top secret recipe. I can click on this drop down and I'll go down and let's click on stop sharing. Here I'll click on remove. And now, although Nestor can view everything on this site, he won't be able to see this recipe. I feel a lot better now. Down in the bottom right-hand corner, I can also click on advanced, and this will look similar to what the permission screen looks like for the site and for the document library. And here I have similar controls over the permissions for this specific document. And just like that, I have now secured our SharePoint site. And I can sleep like a baby tonight, knowing that this recipe is safe and that only me, Patty, and Diego have access to it. You know, the last thing I would want is for a recipe like this to end up on YouTube. That would be devastating for our business. All right, well, that's how you can set permissions in SharePoint. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. To see more videos like this, please consider subscribing. Also, if you want to see me cover any other topics on this channel, leave a note down below. All right, well, that's all I had for you today. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I hope to see you next time. Bye.